The millionaire's wife belittled the cook in front of everyone, unaware of the storm her words would unleash. However, the humble cook's response revealed dark secrets that deeply shook the lives of everyone present. The outcome was so unexpected that no one could have foreseen the devastating consequences that followed. The sultry Jacksonville night air hung heavy with anticipation as the Blackwood mansion came alive with the shimmer of crystal and the murmur of elite conversation. Perched atop a hill overlooking the St. Johns River, the sprawling estate was a beacon of opulence, its marble facade gleaming under strategically placed spotlights. Tonight it played host to the city's most influential figures, drawn like moths to the flame of power and prestige that burned so brightly within its walls. Gavin Blackwood, the mansion's owner and one of Jacksonville's most prominent business tycoons, stood at the center of it all. His tailored Brioni suit, a deep midnight blue that seemed to absorb the light around him, spoke of wealth beyond measure. At 45, Gavin cut an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with piercing grey eyes that seemed to see through the veneers of those around him. His salt and pepper hair, expertly styled, added an air of distinguished maturity that commanded respect from even the most seasoned of his peers. As he navigated the crowd with practiced ease, Gavin's hand rested lightly on the small of his wife's back. Tiffany Blackwood was a vision in white, her Vera Wang gown hugging every curve before cascading to the floor in a waterfall of silk. At 38, she was still breathtakingly beautiful, her golden hair swept up in an intricate updo that showcased a pair of Harry Winston diamond earrings. Tiffany's smile was dazzling, but those who knew her well could see the calculation behind her bright blue eyes. "Darling, the Hastings have just arrived," Tiffany purred, her voice low and melodic. "Shall we greet them?" Gavin nodded, allowing his wife to guide him towards the newest additions to their soiree. As they moved through the grand ballroom, the couple epitomized the very essence of success and power that their guests aspired to emulate. Meanwhile, in the bustling kitchen that lay hidden behind the scenes of this glamorous affair, a very different drama was unfolding. Audrey Foster, newly hired as a sous chef, felt her heart racing as she prepared another tray of canapes. At 28, she was younger than most in her position, her rapid rise through the culinary ranks a testament to her skill and determination. Audrey's chestnut hair was pulled back in a tight bun, a few loose strands framing her face as she worked with focused intensity. Her green eyes, usually bright with enthusiasm, now held a hint of something deeper, a mix of nervousness and resolve that seemed at odds with the simple task of arranging hors d'oeuvres. "Foster, we need those truffled quail egg canapes now," barked the head chef, his face red with the exertion of coordinating the complex culinary dance required for such a high-profile event. Audrey nodded, her hands steady, as she put the finishing touches on her creations. As she lifted the silver tray, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in its polished surface. For a moment, she hardly recognized herself in the crisp white uniform. It was a far cry from the life she'd left behind, a life that had led her to this very moment in the Blackwood mansion. Taking a deep breath, Audrey pushed through the swinging doors and entered the world of luxury that lay beyond. The contrast was immediate and overwhelming. The kitchen's controlled chaos gave way to an atmosphere of refined elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the assembled guests, their light catching on jewels and cufflinks worth more than Audrey would see in a lifetime. As she weaved through the crowd, Audrey couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversation that spoke volumes about the world she had infiltrated. "I hear the merger's going through next week," a silver-haired man in an impeccable suit muttered to his companion. "Blackwood's going to double his net worth overnight. Tiffany's been seen with that art dealer again," a woman whispered behind her champagne flute. "You'd think she'd be more discreet." Audrey filed away each piece of information, her mind racing as she maintained her facade of servile invisibility. She was so lost in thought that she almost didn't notice when a hand reached out to take a canapé from her tray. "These look divine," a smooth voice commented. Audrey looked up to find herself face to face with Gavin Blackwood himself. His grey eyes seemed to look right through her, and for a heart-stopping moment Audrey feared her cover was blown. "Thank you, sir," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Chef's special recipe." Gavin nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You're new here, aren't you? I don't recall seeing you before." Before Audrey could respond, Tiffany appeared at her husband's side, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Darling, the mayor is asking for you. Some pressing matter about the waterfront development." As Gavin excused himself, Tiffany's gaze fell on Audrey, her expression hardening almost imperceptibly. "You, make sure you're keeping up with the demand. I won't have our guests waiting for refreshments." Audrey nodded, murmuring a quiet "yes, ma'am" as she continued her rounds. She could feel Tiffany's eyes following her, and the weight of that gaze sent a chill down her spine. As the night wore on, the atmosphere in the ballroom grew increasingly charged. The alcohol flowed freely, loosening tongues and lowering inhibitions. Audrey found herself privy to a world of secrets and lies, each overheard conversation adding another piece to a puzzle she was desperately trying to solve. It was nearing midnight when disaster struck. Audrey, her arms aching from hours of carrying trays, was making one final round before the dessert course. As she navigated through a particularly dense cluster of guests, she felt someone bump into her from behind. Time seemed to slow as she watched a canapé slide off her tray, arcing through the air in a graceful trajectory that ended squarely on the pristine white silk of Tiffany Blackwood's gown. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to the scene unfolding before them. Tiffany looked down at the red smear marring her dress, her face a mask of shock that quickly morphed into tightly controlled fury. "You idiot!" she hissed, her voice low but carrying in the sudden quiet. "Do you have any idea what you've done? This dress is worth more than you'll make in a year." Audrey felt her face flush with embarrassment and anger. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Blackwood. It was an accident. An accident?" Tiffany cut her off, her voice dripping with disdain. "This is what happens when you hire help that doesn't know its place. People like you shouldn't be allowed anywhere near events like this." The words hit Audrey like a physical blow, and for a moment she struggled to maintain her composure. But as she looked into Tiffany's cold blue eyes, something inside her snapped. All the pent-up emotions, the secrets she'd been carrying, the true reason for her presence in this house, it all came bubbling to the surface. "Perhaps," Audrey said, her voice quiet but steady, "you should worry less about your dress and more about the skeletons in your closet, Mrs. Blackwood." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Tiffany's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed dangerously. "How dare you? Is there a problem here?" Gavin's deep voice cut through the tension. He had appeared seemingly out of nowhere, his expression unreadable as he surveyed the scene. Tiffany turned to her husband, her voice honey-sweet but with an undercurrent of steel. "This employee has ruined my gown and then had the audacity to speak to me in a most inappropriate manner. I want her dismissed immediately." Gavin's gaze shifted to Audrey, who met his eyes unflinchingly. In that moment something passed between them, a spark of recognition perhaps, or the stirring of curiosity. "Let's not be hasty," Gavin said slowly. "Accidents happen. Miss Foster," Audrey supplied. "Audrey Foster." "Miss Foster," Gavin continued, "I'm sure didn't intend any harm. Why don't we discuss this in private? My study, perhaps?" As Gavin led both women away from the prying eyes and eager ears of their guests, the whispers began. The glamorous facade of the evening had cracked, revealing glimpses of the tumultuous currents running beneath the surface of the Blackwoods' seemingly perfect life. In the quiet of Gavin's study, surrounded by leather-bound books and priceless artifacts, the stage was set for revelations that would shake the very foundations of their world. Audrey knew that everything she had worked for, everything she had sacrificed, had led to this moment. As Gavin closed the door behind them, the click of the latch felt like the sealing of a fate that none of them could have predicted. The night that had begun with such glittering promise now teetered on the edge of chaos. In the coming hours, secrets would be unveiled, alliances would shift, and lives would be irrevocably changed. For Audrey Foster, it was the point of no return, a moment that would define not just her future, but the future of the Blackwood Empire itself. The heavy oak door of Gavin's study closed with a soft thud, sealing the trio in a cocoon of tense silence. The room, with its rich mahogany paneling and shelves lined with leather-bound first editions, seemed to absorb the tension radiating from its occupants. Gavin moved behind his imposing desk, a masterpiece of 18th century craftsmanship, and gestured for the women to sit in the plush chairs facing him. Tiffany perched on the edge of her seat, her posture rigid, the stain on her dress a stark reminder of the incident that had brought them here. Audrey, by contrast, sat back in her chair, a calm resolve settling over her features. Gavin's piercing grey eyes moved between the two women before settling on Audrey. "Miss Foster, I believe you have something to say. Something about skeletons in closets, was it?" Audrey took a deep breath, her gaze unwavering. Mr. Blackwood, what I'm about to tell you will be difficult to hear, but I assure you, every word is true. Tiffany scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. Oh, please spare us your dramatic... Tiffany, Gavin cut her off, his tone sharp. Let her speak. Audrey nodded gratefully before continuing. My father, Francisco Foster, was an accountant for one of your subsidiary companies, Blackwood Innovations. 6 months ago, he discovered significant financial irregularities, funds being siphoned off into offshore accounts, false invoices, ghost employees. He was preparing to bring this information to you directly when he died in a car accident. Gavin leaned forward, his brow furrowed. I remember that accident. It was tragic. But what does this have to do with my wife? Everything, Audrey said, her voice barely above a whisper. Because the trail of embezzled funds led directly to an account under the name of Tiffany Blackwood. The room fell silent, the accusation hanging in the air like a physical presence. Tiffany's face had gone pale, her eyes wide with shock, or was it fear? This is preposterous, Tiffany finally exclaimed, jumping to her feet. Gavin, surely you don't believe this. This kitchen help over your own wife. Gavin held up a hand, his expression unreadable. Do you have proof of these allegations, Miss Foster? Audrey nodded slowly. My father kept meticulous records. Before he died, he managed to hide a USB drive with all the evidence. I've spent the last 6 months trying to piece together what happened, to understand why he died. That's why I'm here, Mr. Blackwood, to uncover the truth and bring those responsible to justice. Tiffany's laugh was brittle, almost hysterical. This is absurd. Gavin, call security. Have this woman removed from our home immediately. But Gavin remained seated, his eyes never leaving Audrey's face. No, he said quietly. I want to hear more. Miss Foster, you'll understand if I need to verify your claims. In the meantime, you'll continue your work here as usual. And Tiffany, he turned to his wife, his gaze hardening. You will not interfere. Is that clear? Tiffany's mouth opened and closed, shock evident on her face. Without another word, she stormed out of the study, slamming the door behind her. As the echo of the slammed door faded, Gavin turned back to Audrey. You're playing a dangerous game, Miss Foster. I hope for your sake that you know what you're doing. Audrey stood, smoothing down her uniform. It's not a game, Mr. Blackwood. It's about justice for my father and for all those who've been wronged by the corruption in your company. As she left the study, Audrey could feel Gavin's eyes on her back, weighing, assessing. She had thrown down the gauntlet, and now the real challenge began. The following days at the Blackwood mansion were a study in barely contained chaos. On the surface, life continued as normal. Meals were prepared, rooms were cleaned, social engagements were kept. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, currents of tension and suspicion swirled. Audrey found herself under constant scrutiny. Tiffany had taken to appearing in the kitchen at odd hours, her smile saccharine but her eyes cold as she watched Audrey work. Just checking on things, she would say, her voice dripping with false sweetness. We want to make sure everything is up to standard. But it wasn't just Tiffany's presence that Audrey had to contend with. She soon became aware of a new figure shadowing her movements, Samuel Reeves, the Blackwoods' head of security. A former military man with close-cropped salt and pepper hair and a perpetual frown, Samuel seemed to materialize wherever Audrey went. One afternoon, as Audrey was preparing a tray of tea to be served in the solarium, Samuel appeared in the kitchen doorway, his bulk filling the frame. Miss Foster, he said, his voice gravelly. A word, if you please. Audrey set down the teapot, wiping her hands on her apron. Of course, Mr. Reeves. How can I help you? Samuel stepped closer, lowering his voice. I'm not sure what game you're playing, but I want you to know that I've got my eye on you. The Blackwoods have been good to me, and I don't take kindly to anyone trying to cause trouble in this house. Audrey met his gaze steadily. I assure you, Mr. Reeves, I'm not playing any games. I'm just here to do my job. Samuel's eyes narrowed. See that you do. Just your job, nothing more. Because if I catch even a hint of you snooping around or causing problems, you'll be out on your ear faster than you can blink. Understood? Audrey nodded, her heart racing but her exterior calm. As Samuel turned to leave, she called out, Mr. Reeves? Just out of curiosity, how long have you worked for the Blackwoods? Samuel paused, looking back at her with suspicion. Going on 15 years now. Why? No reason, Audrey said lightly. Just making conversation. As Samuel left, Audrey's mind was whirling. 15 years. That meant Samuel had been here during the time her father had uncovered the financial irregularities. Could he be involved? Or was he just another pawn in this complex game? Later that evening, as Audrey was finishing up in the kitchen, she overheard raised voices coming from Gavin's study. Unable to resist, she crept closer to the partially open door. "Can't believe you're entertaining these ridiculous accusations." Tiffany's voice was shrill with anger. "I'm not entertaining anything," Gavin replied, his tone measured but with an edge of steel. "I'm investigating. There's a difference." "Investigating? Your own wife? Based on the word of some girl?" "This girl has made some very serious allegations, Tiffany. Allegations that, if true, could destroy everything we've built. I can't simply ignore them." There was a pause, and when Tiffany spoke again, her voice had softened. "Darling, you know me. We've been together for 10 years. Do you really think I would do something like this?" Gavin sighed heavily. "I don't know what to think anymore, Tiffany. But I intend to find out the truth one way or another." Audrey backed away from the door, her mind racing. She had driven a wedge between Gavin and Tiffany, but was it enough? And more importantly, how could she use this tension to her advantage? As the days passed, Audrey found herself walking a precarious tightrope. She continued her duties as sous chef, all the while looking for opportunities to gather more information. She struck up conversations with other staff members, carefully probing for any tidbits about the Blackwoods or the company's finances. One evening, as she was preparing dinner, she overheard two of the maids gossiping in the pantry. "Did you see Mrs. Blackwood leave last night? All dressed up and not with Mr. Blackwood, if you know what I mean," one maid whispered. "Again? That's the third time this week. And always meeting that same man, what's his name, Ottavio?" Audrey's ears perked up at this. Ottavio, could this be another piece of the puzzle? But as Audrey's investigation progressed, so did Tiffany's paranoia. The mistress of the house began to implement stricter rules for the staff, limiting their access to certain areas of the mansion and monitoring their comings and goings more closely. One afternoon, Audrey returned to the staff quarters to find her room in disarray, drawers pulled out and contents strewn about. Nothing seemed to be missing, but the message was clear. Someone had been searching for something. That night, unable to sleep, Audrey crept out of her room and made her way to Gavin's study. She knew it was a risk, but she had to find out if there was any information there that could help her case. As she carefully picked the lock, a skill she had reluctantly learned during her months of investigation, she heard a noise behind her. Spinning around, she came face to face with Gavin himself. "Mr. Blackwood," she gasped, her heart pounding. "I can explain." Gavin held up a hand, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "I think it's time we had another talk, Miss Foster. Don't you?" He opened the study door, gesturing for her to enter. As Audrey stepped inside, she knew that this conversation could change everything. The time for half-truths and careful maneuvering was over. Now she would have to lay all her cards on the table and hope that Gavin Blackwood was the man she believed him to be. The study seemed different in the dead of night, the shadows longer, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken truths. Gavin moved to his desk, but didn't sit, instead leaning against it as he faced Audrey. "I've been doing some digging of my own," he said, his voice low. "Your father's accident, there were some inconsistencies in the police report, brake lines that showed signs of tampering, witnesses who suddenly changed their stories. It all points to something far more sinister than a simple car crash." Audrey felt a lump form in her throat. "You believe me then?" Gavin's expression was grim. "I'm starting to, but I need to know everything, Audrey. No more secrets, no more half-truths. Tell me exactly what you know and what you suspect." And so, in the quiet of the study, with only the ticking of an antique clock to mark the passage of time, Audrey told her story. She spoke of her father's growing unease in the weeks before his death, of hushed phone calls and late nights poring over financial records. She described finding the hidden USB drive, encoded with layers of encryption that had taken her months to break. "The files were fragmented," Audrey explained, her voice hoarse from talking. "But what I could piece together pointed to a massive embezzlement scheme. Millions of dollars funneled through a maze of shell companies and offshore accounts. And at the center of it all—" "Tiffany," Gavin finished, his voice barely above a whisper. Audrey nodded. "And someone else. A name kept coming up in my father's notes. Ottavio. I don't know who he is, but I think he's deeply involved in all of this." Gavin's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. Otavio Mendez, an art dealer. He and Tiffany have been close for some time. I thought it was just another of her flirtations, but now the silence that followed was heavy with implication. Finally, Gavin spoke again, his voice filled with a quiet determination. We need proof, Audrey. Concrete, irrefutable evidence. Without it, it's just your word against Tiffany's. And in our world, in our circles, that's not enough. Audrey leaned forward, her green eyes blazing with intensity. I have an idea, but it's risky. There's a charity gala next week at the art museum. Otavio will be there, and I'm willing to bet Tiffany will find a way to meet with him. If we could somehow monitor their conversation. Gavin nodded slowly, a plan forming in his mind. I can get you in as part of the catering staff, and I have some connections that might be able to provide us with some surveillance equipment. As they hammered out the details of their plan, neither Gavin nor Audrey noticed the shadow that briefly darkened the crack under the study door, or the soft footsteps retreating down the hallway. The following days were a flurry of covert activity. Gavin, under the guise of his usual business dealings, made arrangements for the surveillance equipment. Audrey, meanwhile, focused on her cover, practicing her role as a server and memorizing the layout of the museum. But as the day of the gala approached, the tension in the Blackwood mansion reached a fever pitch. Tiffany's behavior became increasingly erratic. She would vacillate between saccharine sweetness and cold fury, her mood swings keeping the entire household on edge. One evening, just 2 days before the gala, Audrey was cornered by Tiffany in a quiet hallway. I know what you're trying to do, Tiffany hissed, her perfectly manicured nails digging into Audrey's arm. You think you can come into my home, seduce my husband, destroy everything I've built? You have no idea who you're dealing with, little girl. Audrey stood her ground, meeting Tiffany's gaze steadily. I think I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Mrs. Blackwood. The question is, do you? Tiffany's eyes widened, a flicker of fear passing across her face before it was replaced by cold determination. This is your last warning. Leave now, forget everything you think you know, or I promise you'll regret it. As Tiffany stalked away, Audrey leaned against the wall, her heart pounding. The threat was clear, but it only strengthened her resolve. She was close, so close, to unraveling this whole conspiracy. She couldn't back down now, not when justice for her father was within reach. The night before the gala, Audrey lay awake in her small room in the staff quarters, her mind racing. Tomorrow would change everything one way or another. As she finally drifted off to sleep, her last thoughts were of her father. I'm doing this for you, Dad, she whispered into the darkness. I promise I'll make things right. Little did Audrey know that across the mansion in the opulent master suite, Tiffany Blackwood was also awake, her mind working furiously. A phone lay on the bed beside her, a text message glowing on its screen. Everything is in place. Tomorrow, we end this. As the first light of dawn broke over Jacksonville, casting long shadows across the St. Johns River, the stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the foundations of the Blackwood Empire. The pieces were in motion, the players ready. All that remained was for the curtain to rise on the final act of this high-stakes drama. The Jacksonville Museum of Modern Art buzzed with anticipation as the city's elite filed through its gleaming glass doors. The annual charity gala, a cornerstone of the social calendar, transformed the austere gallery spaces into a glittering wonderland of champagne flutes and designer gowns. Amidst the swirling crowd, Audrey Foster moved with practiced grace, her server's uniform allowing her to blend seamlessly into the background. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail. Gavin Blackwood stood near the center, commanding attention in a perfectly tailored tuxedo as he chatted with the mayor. Tiffany, resplendent in a daring red Valentino gown, floated from group to group, her laugh tinkling like ice in a crystal glass. And there, by a striking abstract sculpture, stood Otavio Mendez, art dealer, charmer, and if Audrey's suspicions were correct, a key player in the web of deceit she was determined to unravel. Audrey's hand unconsciously went to her collar, where a tiny microphone was concealed. Gavin's connections had come through, providing her with state-of-the-art surveillance equipment. Now all she needed was to get close enough to Tiffany and Otavio to capture their conversation. As she maneuvered through the crowd with her tray of champagne, Audrey caught Gavin's eye. He gave her an almost imperceptible nod, and she knew it was time to put their plan into action. Making her way towards Otavio, Audrey pretended to stumble, sending her tray of drinks crashing to the floor. The noise drew attention, including Tiffany's, who rushed over with a look of barely concealed fury. "You clumsy fool!" Tiffany hissed, her voice low but venomous. "Can't you do anything right?" Ottavio, ever the gentleman, intervened. Now, querida, accidents happen, let's not make a scene." He turned to Audrey with a charming smile. "Are you all right, Min Herlinda?" Audrey, feigning embarrassment, nodded. "Yes, thank you, sir. I'm so sorry about the mess." As she knelt to clean up the broken glass, she heard Tiffany whisper to Ottavio, "Meet me in the East Wing storage room in 10 minutes. We need to talk." Audrey's heart raced. This was it, the opportunity they'd been waiting for. 10 minutes later, Audrey had positioned herself in a hidden alcove near the storage room, her microphone ready to pick up every word. She watched as Tiffany slipped into the room, followed moments later by Ottavio. Their voices, muffled at first, grew clearer as Audrey adjusted the receiver. "Ottavio, we have a problem." Tiffany's voice came through, tense and urgent. "That little bitch Audrey Foster, she knows something. She's been snooping around asking questions." Ottavio's reply was calm, almost lazy. "Relax, meu amor, what can she possibly know? We've been careful. Her father was Francisco Foster." There was a sharp intake of breath from Ottavio. "The accountant? I thought we took care of that situation." "Apparently not well enough," Tiffany snapped. "She's gotten close to Gavin. I think she's trying to turn him against me." "Then we must act quickly," Ottavio said, his voice hardening. "The next transfer is scheduled for tomorrow night. Once that money is moved, it won't matter what the girl knows or doesn't know. We'll be untouchable. And if she interferes before then?" There was a pause, and when Ottavio spoke again, his voice sent chills down Audrey's spine. "Then we'll have to make sure she meets the same unfortunate fate as her father." Audrey's blood ran cold. She had suspected foul play in her father's death, but hearing it confirmed so callously made her stomach churn. She was so focused on the conversation that she didn't notice the shadow falling over her until it was too late. A strong hand clamped over her mouth, while another arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against a solid chest. Panic surged through her as she was dragged away from her hiding spot, kicking and struggling in vain. Well, what do we have here?" Samuel's gruff voice whispered in her ear. "Looks like Mrs. Blackwood was right about you after all." Audrey was marched through a series of back corridors until they reached a small, windowless room that appeared to be used for storage. Samuel shoved her inside, closing the door behind them. "Start talking, Foster," he growled, looming over her. "What exactly did you hear?" Audrey straightened her spine, meeting his gaze defiantly. "I heard enough to know that you're all involved in something illegal. Embezzlement, maybe even murder. How much are they paying you to look the other way, Samuel?" A flicker of something, guilt, uncertainty, passed across Samuel's face before it hardened again. "You don't know what you're talking about. The Blackwoods have been good to me, given me a life I never thought I'd have. I'm not about to throw that away because of some wild accusations." "Even if those accusations are true," Audrey pressed. "You were military once, Samuel. You swore an oath to protect and serve. Is this really how you want to honor that oath?" Samuel's jaw clenched. For a moment, Audrey thought she might have gotten through to him. But then his expression closed off and he reached for his phone. "Mrs. Blackwood will want to know about this. Don't move." As Samuel turned slightly to make the call, Audrey saw her chance. With every ounce of strength she possessed, she shoved him, catching him off balance. His head struck the corner of a metal shelf with a sickening thud, and he crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Hands shaking, Audrey checked his pulse. Still alive, thank God. She quickly bound his hands and feet with some nearby packing tape, then grabbed his phone and keycard before slipping out of the room. Her mind raced as she made her way back to the main gallery. She had the evidence now, the recorded conversation between Tiffany and Ottavio, but she needed to get it to Gavin before Tiffany realized what had happened. As she re-entered the crowded main hall, her eyes frantically searched for Gavin. She spotted him near the bar, deep in conversation with a group of investors. Taking a deep breath, she approached, touched his arm lightly. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there's an urgent matter that requires your attention in your office." Gavin's eyebrows rose slightly, but he quickly excused himself from the group. As soon as they were out of earshot, Audrey whispered, "We need to talk. Now. I have the proof." They made their way to a quiet corner of the museum, where Gavin kept a small office for foundation business. Once inside, Audrey played the recording for him, Gavin's face grew increasingly grave as he listened, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of his desk. When the recording finished, silence hung heavy in the air. Finally, Gavin spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "All this time, I knew Tiffany had her secrets, but this? Murder? Embezzlement on this scale?" He looked at Audrey, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and determination. "We need to go to the authorities." "Wait," Audrey said, her mind working furiously. "They mentioned a transfer happening tomorrow night. If we can catch them in the act, we'll have irrefutable proof." Gavin nodded slowly. "You're right, but it's too dangerous for you to be involved any further. I'll handle it from here." "No," Audrey said firmly. "I started this and I'm going to see it through for my father." Their eyes met, a moment of understanding passing between them. But before Gavin could respond, the office door burst open. Tiffany stood there, her face a mask of cold fury, flanked by two large men Audrey didn't recognize. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Tiffany's voice dripped with venom. "I always knew you had a weakness for younger women, Gavin, but I never thought you'd be stupid enough to believe her lies." "They're not lies, Tiffany," Gavin said, standing to face his wife. "It's over. We have proof of everything. The embezzlement, Francisco Foster's murder, all of it." For a split second, fear flashed in Tiffany's eyes. Then her composure returned and she laughed, a chilling, mirthless sound. "Proof? You mean that little recording your pet detective made? I'm afraid you'll find that's inadmissible, Samuel." The head of security appeared in the doorway, a nasty bruise forming on his temple, but very much conscious. "I'm sorry, sir," he said to Gavin, not meeting his eyes. "Mrs. Blackwood caught me up on everything. The girl attacked me, stole my phone. Anything you think you heard was likely doctored." Audrey felt the blood drain from her face. "No, that's not true. Gavin, you have to believe me." But doubt had crept into Gavin's expression. He looked between Audrey and Tiffany, confusion and hurt warring in his eyes. Tiffany pressed her advantage. "I didn't want to believe it, darling, but it seems Miss Foster here has been playing us both, running a long con, worming her way into our lives, all to get her hands on our money." She turned to Audrey, her smile vicious. "Did you really think you'd get away with it? That's not, I never," Audrey sputtered, realizing with growing horror how neatly she'd been outmaneuvered. "Search her," Tiffany ordered the two men with her. Despite Audrey's protests, they roughly patted her down. From her pocket, one of them pulled out a small velvet pouch. Well, what do we have here?" Tiffany said, taking the pouch. She upended it, and a glittering diamond necklace, one Audrey had seen adorning Tiffany's neck earlier that evening, fell into her palm. Audrey's eyes widened in disbelief. "That's not mine. I've never seen that before in my life." But the damage was done. Gavin's face had hardened, the trust they'd built crumbling before her eyes. "I think it's time you left, Miss Foster," he said, his voice cold. "Samuel, escort her out, and make sure she doesn't take anything else that doesn't belong to her." "Gavin, please," Audrey pleaded, as Samuel took her arm. "You know me. You know I wouldn't do this. Think about my father, about everything I've told you." For a moment, something flickered in Gavin's eyes, a hint of doubt of the connection they'd formed. But then Tiffany was at his side, her hand on his arm, and the moment passed. As Samuel led her away, Audrey's mind raced. She couldn't let it end like this, couldn't let Tiffany win. Somehow she had to find a way to prove her innocence and expose the truth. The cool night air hit Audrey like a slap, as Samuel none too gently pushed her out of the museum's service entrance. "Don't come back," he growled. "If I see you anywhere near the Blackwoods again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." The door slammed shut behind her, leaving Audrey alone in the dark alley, her world in shambles. She leaned against the rough brick wall, fighting back tears of frustration and despair. How had it all gone so wrong? But as the initial shock wore off, determination began to take its place. She wasn't beaten yet. Tiffany and Ottavio had mentioned a transfer happening tomorrow night. If she could just find a way to expose that transaction, she could still set things right. First, though, she needed help. Pulling out the phone she'd taken from Samuel, thankfully Tiffany's goons hadn't thought to search her that thoroughly, Audrey scrolled through the contacts. One name caught her eye: Elena Vasquez, JCPD. Taking a deep breath, Audrey hit the call button. A sleepy voice answered on the third ring. "Samuel, do you know what time it is?" "Detective Vasquez, this isn't Samuel. My name is Audrey Foster, and I have information about a major financial crime that's about to go down. I need your help." There was a pause on the other end of the line, then, "I'm listening." As Audrey began to explain, she felt a glimmer of hope. The night wasn't over yet, and neither was her fight for justice. Back inside the museum, the gala continued, a glittering facade hiding the turmoil that had just unfolded. Gavin stood by the bar, a tumbler of scotch in his hand, his mind reeling from the events of the past hour. "Darling, you look positively grim." Tiffany's voice cut through his thoughts as she sidled up next to him. "Surely you're not still upset about that little gold digger?" Gavin took a long sip of his drink before responding. "You have to admit, Tiffany, her story was convincing." Tiffany's laugh was light, but her eyes were hard. "Oh, Gavin, always so ready to see the best in people. It's what I love about you, but really, you must learn to be more discerning." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I've been doing some digging of my own. Did you know that girl has a history of this sort of thing? Small cons, nothing big enough to land her in real trouble, but a pattern nonetheless. She saw you as her big score." Gavin frowned. It didn't fit with the Audrey he thought he knew, but then again, how well did he really know her? And the stuff about her father? The financial irregularities? All part of her con, I'm sure, Tiffany said smoothly. "I'll have our accountants go over everything with a fine-tooth comb tomorrow, just to set your mind at ease. But really, darling, let's not let this unpleasantness ruin our evening." She plucked the glass from his hand, setting it aside. "Come, dance with me. Show everyone that the Blackwoods are as strong as ever." As Tiffany led him to the dance floor, Gavin couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. But with his wife in his arms, her perfume enveloping him in a familiar cloud, it was easier to push those doubts aside. For now, at least. Across the room, Ottavio watched the couple with narrowed eyes. He pulled out his phone, sending a quick text. "Close call. Acceleration required. Initiate Protocol Omega at dawn." The reply came almost instantly. "Understood. Assets in place, awaiting final confirmation." Ottavio allowed himself a small smile as he pocketed his phone. By this time tomorrow, all their carefully laid plans would come to fruition. And if Audrey Foster or anyone else tried to get in their way, well, Jacksonville was a dangerous city. Accidents happened all the time. As the gala wound down and the last of the guests departed, a palpable tension settled over the museum. The night's events had set in motion a chain reaction that would come to a head in the next 24 hours. For Audrey, it was a race against time to prove her innocence and expose the truth. For Gavin, it was a battle between his instincts and the life he thought he knew. And for Tiffany and Ottavio, it was the final push in a long game of deception and greed. The stage was set for a showdown that would change all their lives forever. As the first light of dawn broke over the St. John's River, casting long shadows across the city, the players in this high-stakes drama prepared for what promised to be the most crucial day of their lives. Little did they know that fate had one more twist in store, a wild card that none of them could have anticipated, one that would shatter alliances, reveal long-buried truths, and test the limits of loyalty and love. The countdown had begun. The first rays of sunlight crept over Jacksonville's skyline as Audrey Foster huddled in a 24-hour diner, nursing her third cup of coffee. Across from her sat Detective Elena Vasquez, her sharp eyes scanning the documents spread out on the table between them. "This is a lot to process," Elena said, rubbing her temples. "You're telling me that Gavin Blackwood's wife is involved in a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme, possibly murder, and you have proof?" Audrey nodded, pushing forward the USB drive she'd inherited from her father. "Everything's here. Financial records, communication logs, even some audio recordings. But it's not enough." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Seems like plenty to me." "It's circumstantial," Audrey explained, frustration evident in her voice. "We need to catch them in the act. There's a major transfer happening tonight. If we can intercept that, we'll have irrefutable proof." The detective leaned back, considering. "It's risky. If we move too soon and they catch wind of it, they could disappear with everything. But if we wait too long, we might lose our only chance," Audrey finished. Eleanor nodded, then fixed Audrey with a penetrating stare. "Why are you doing this, Audrey? Really? It can't just be about your father anymore." Audrey was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "At first it was about justice for my dad. But now, I've seen the kind of damage people like Tiffany and Ottavio can do. The lives they ruin without a second thought. Someone has to stop them." A small smile played at the corners of Elena's mouth. "All right, I'm in. But we do this by the book. No vigilante stuff, got it? Audrey nodded, relief washing over her. Thank you. You won't regret this. As they began to plan their next move across town, Gavin Blackwood was facing a crisis of his own. He stood in his home office, surrounded by financial reports and legal documents. He'd been up all night, poring over every transaction, every contract from the past 5 years, and with each passing hour, the knot in his stomach grew tighter. There were discrepancies, small at first, easily overlooked, but as he dug deeper, a pattern emerged. Funds disappearing into shell companies, invoices for services never rendered, properties purchased and sold at suspicious prices. Gavin sank into his chair, his head in his hands. How could he have been so blind? He prided himself on his business acumen, on building an empire from the ground up, and all this time, a soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Mr. Blackwood? It was Samuel, looking uncomfortable. Mrs. Blackwood is asking for you. She says it's urgent. Gavin straightened, composing himself. Tell her I'll be down in a moment. As Samuel left, Gavin's gaze fell on a framed photo on his desk. It was from his wedding day, Tiffany radiant in white, both of them beaming at the camera. Had it all been a lie? Or had things just spiraled out of control? With a heavy sigh, he stood. It was time to confront his wife. Meanwhile, in a sleek high-rise apartment overlooking the river, Otavio Mendez was finalizing preparations for the night's transfer. His fingers flew over the keyboard, setting up encrypted channels and offshore accounts. A notification pinged on his screen, an email from one of his contacts in the Cayman Islands. He opened it, his eyes widening as he read the contents. Merda, he muttered, reaching for his phone. He dialed Tiffany's number, drumming his fingers impatiently as it rang. What is it? Tiffany's voice was tense when she answered. We have a problem, Otavio said without preamble. The Cayman account has been flagged. We need to reroute the funds. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. How? We don't have time to set up new accounts. Otavio's mind raced. There might be a way, but it's risky. We'd need to use one of Gavin's legitimate business accounts as a temporary holding place. Are you insane? Tiffany hissed. That would leave a direct trail back to us. Only for a few hours, Otavio countered. Just long enough to move the money to a new secure location. It's our only option if we want to complete the transfer tonight. There was a long pause. Then, fine, do it. But Otavio, if this goes wrong, it won't, he assured her. Trust me, querida. By this time tomorrow we'll be sipping cocktails on a beach far from here. As he hung up, Otavio allowed himself a small smile. What he hadn't told Tiffany was that he had no intention of moving those funds again once they hit Gavin's account. It was time to cut his losses and disappear. After all, in this game, it was every man for himself. Back at the Blackwood mansion, Gavin found Tiffany in the sunroom, looking immaculate as always in a crisp white pantsuit. She smiled as he entered, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Darling, there you are. I was beginning to think you were avoiding me. Gavin's response was measured. Just catching up on some work, you said it was urgent. Tiffany waved a hand dismissively. Oh, it's nothing, really. I just thought we should discuss the fall gala after last night's unpleasantness. I think it's important we present a united front. Gavin studied his wife, noting the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers kept smoothing non-existent wrinkles from her slacks. She was nervous, he realized, and trying very hard not to show it. Tiffany, he said slowly, I think we need to talk about something more important than galas. Her smile faltered for just a moment before returning, brittle as glass. Oh? And what might that be? I've been looking over our financials, Gavin said, watching her reaction closely. There are some irregularities I can't explain. Tiffany's laugh was just a beat too late, too loud. Honestly, Gavin, you know I don't understand all that financial mumbo-jumbo. Isn't that why we have accountants? These aren't minor discrepancies, Tiffany. We're talking millions of dollars. He took a step closer, his voice low. What's going on? For a moment, something like panic flashed in Tiffany's eyes. Then her mask of cool composure slipped back into place. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Why don't we call Bernard from accounting and have him explain everything? Before Gavin could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Blackwood, this is Detective Vasquez. We need to talk. It's about your wife and Otavio Mendez. Meet me at Hemming Park in 1 hour. Come alone. Gavin's mind raced. This was his chance to get answers from an impartial source. But could he trust this detective? For all he knew, it could be another of Tiffany's manipulations. He looked up to find Tiffany watching him intently. "Important business?" she asked, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. Gavin made a split-second decision. "Just a supplier issue. Nothing I can't handle." He forced a smile. "You know what? You're right. Let's call Bernard. I'm sure he can clear everything up." As Tiffany turned to make the call, relief evident in the set of her shoulders, Gavin felt a pang of guilt. He hated lying to her even now, but if there was any chance of uncovering the truth, he had to take it. An hour later, Gavin found himself sitting on a bench in Hemming Park, his eyes scanning the lunchtime crowd for any sign of Detective Vasquez. His palms were sweaty, his heart racing. He felt like a character in one of those spy novels he used to read, half expecting a shadowy figure to slip him a manila envelope at any moment. "Mr. Blackwood?" He turned to find a woman in her late 30s with short dark hair and keen eyes standing beside him. She flashed a badge. "Detective Elena Vasquez. Thank you for meeting me." As she sat down, Gavin noticed another figure hovering nearby, a young woman with chestnut hair pulled back in a tight bun. With a jolt, he recognized Audrey Foster. "What is she doing here?" he asked, his voice tight. Eleanor held up a placating hand. "Mr. Blackwood, I know you have reason to distrust Miss Foster, but I need you to listen to what we have to say. It's more important than you can imagine." Over the next hour, Elena and Audrey laid out everything they knew: the embezzlement scheme, the suspected murder of Francisco Foster, the planned transfer happening that night. With each revelation, Gavin felt his world tilting further off its axis. I don't know what to say," he finally managed, his voice hoarse. "Part of me suspected something wasn't right, but how could I have been so blind?" Audrey's voice was gentle when she spoke. "You weren't blind, Gavin. You trusted the woman you loved. There's no shame in that." He looked at her then, really looked at her for the first time since that night at the gala. The determination in her eyes, the set of her jaw. This wasn't a con artist or a gold digger. This was a woman fighting for justice, for what was right. "What do you need from me?" he asked. Elena leaned forward. "We need access to your systems. When they make the transfer tonight, we need to be able to track it in real time. Can you do that without tipping them off?" Gavin nodded slowly. "I think so. I'll need to call in a favor from our IT department, but I can make it happen." As they hammered out the details of their plan, Gavin felt a strange mix of emotions washing over him. Anger at the betrayal, grief for the life he thought he had, but also hope that he could make things right, that he could be part of bringing these criminals to justice. As the meeting wound down, Audrey pulled him aside. "Gavin, I'm sorry for everything. I know this must be incredibly difficult for you." He managed a wry smile. "Oddly enough, I think I should be thanking you. If you hadn't persisted, hadn't fought so hard, who knows how long this might have gone on." Audrey touched his arm gently. "We're going to get through this together." As Gavin watched her walk away, he felt something shift inside him. The pain was still there, the betrayal still raw, but alongside it was a growing sense of purpose, of clarity. For the first time in years, he felt like he was truly seeing the world, and himself, clearly. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Gavin returned to the office, making a show of business as usual while secretly working with his most trusted IT specialist to set up the monitoring systems they'd need. Audrey and Eleanor coordinated with a team of detectives, preparing for every possible scenario. As evening fell, tension mounted. Gavin found himself in his office, ostensibly working late, but in reality, waiting for the transfer to begin. A secure laptop provided by Elena sat open on his desk, ready to track every movement of funds. His phone buzzed. A text from Tiffany. "Working late again, don't forget we have dinner reservations at 9. Gavin's fingers hovered over the keys. What could he say? How do you respond to your wife when you know she's about to attempt a multi-million-dollar theft? Before he could decide, the laptop pinged. A window popped up, showing a flurry of activity in one of the company's main accounts. It was starting. With shaking hands, Gavin dialed Eleanor's number. "It's happening," he said as soon as she picked up. "They're moving the money now." "We see it," Eleanor confirmed. "Keep monitoring. We're moving into position." For the next hour, Gavin watched in growing disbelief as millions of dollars flowed through his company's accounts, bouncing between shell corporations and offshore havens. It was like watching a masterclass in financial sleight of hand. Impressive, if it wasn't so utterly criminal. Suddenly there was a commotion outside his office. Raised voices, the sound of running feet. His door burst open, and there stood Tiffany, her face pale, her eyes wild. "We have to go," she said, her voice urgent. "Now, don't ask questions, just come with me." Gavin stood slowly, his heart pounding. This was it, the moment of truth. "I can't do that, Tiffany." She stared at him, uncomprehending. Then her gaze fell on the laptop, the financial transfers still scrolling across the screen. Understanding dawned in her eyes, quickly followed by fury. "You," she spat. "You're working with them. With that little bitch Audrey." "It's over, Tiffany," Gavin said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "The police are on their way. There's nowhere left to run." For a moment, Tiffany looked like she might lunge at him. Then, quick as a flash, she turned and bolted from the room. Gavin gave chase, following her through the winding corridors of the office building. He could hear sirens in the distance, growing closer by the second. He burst through the fire exit onto the roof, the cool night air hitting him like a slap. Tiffany stood at the edge, her blonde hair whipping in the wind, Ottavio beside her. A helicopter hovered nearby, its rotors drowning out all other sound. "Don't do this," Gavin shouted over the noise. "Please, Tiffany, it doesn't have to end this way." Tiffany turned to look at him one last time. For a moment, Gavin thought he saw a flicker of the woman he'd fallen in love with all those years ago. Then it was gone, replaced by a cold determination. Without another word, Tiffany and Ottavio leapt into the waiting helicopter. As it lifted off, banking sharply over the glittering Jacksonville skyline, Gavin felt a strange sense of finality wash over him. It was done. For better or worse, a chapter of his life had closed. He didn't know how long he stood there, watching the helicopter disappear into the night. He was vaguely aware of the roof access door bursting open, of Elena and her team rushing past him, of Audrey's gentle hand on his arm. "Gavin, are you all right?" He turned to look at her, seeing the concern in her green eyes. And despite everything, the betrayal, the loss, the uncertainty of what came next, Gavin found himself smiling. "No," he said honestly, "but I think I will be." As they made their way back inside, surrounded by the controlled chaos of a major police operation, Gavin felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Hope for justice, for redemption, for a future unburdened by lies and deceit. The road ahead would be long and difficult. There would be investigations, trials, the messy process of untangling years of financial fraud. His reputation, his company, everything he'd built, would be scrutinized and questioned. But as he looked at Audrey, saw the determination and compassion in her face, Gavin knew he wouldn't be facing it alone. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon as Gavin and Audrey sat in Elena's office, giving their official statements. The events of the night felt almost surreal in the harsh fluorescent light of the police station. "So what happens now?" Gavin asked, his voice rough with exhaustion. Elena leaned back in her chair, rubbing her eyes. Now we build our case. It's going to be a long process, but with the evidence we've gathered and your cooperation, we've got a strong chance of bringing Tiffany and Ottavio to justice." "And the company?" Audrey asked, glancing at Gavin. "There will be an investigation," Elena said frankly, "but Mr. Blackwood's cooperation tonight will go a long way towards mitigating any potential fallout." Gavin nodded, his mind already racing with the challenges ahead. Damage control, restructuring, regaining the trust of his employees and shareholders. It was daunting, but not impossible. As they left the police station, the city was coming to life around them. Early morning joggers, delivery trucks, the first commuters heading to work, all oblivious to the drama that had unfolded overnight. "What will you do now?" Gavin asked Audrey as they stood on the steps of the police station, the early morning sun casting long shadows across the street. Audrey took a deep breath, considering. "Honestly, I'm not sure. For so long, this mission, uncovering the truth, getting justice for my father, it's been my whole life. Now that it's over," she trailed off, looking a bit lost. Gavin nodded, understanding all too well the feeling of having one's purpose suddenly stripped away. "You know," he said slowly, "I'm going to need help. Rebuilding the company, making things right. It's going to be a massive undertaking, and I could use someone I trust by my side." Audrey looked at him, surprise and something else, hope, perhaps, flickering in her eyes. "Are you offering me a job, Mr. Blackwood?" "I'm offering you a partnership," Gavin clarified. "Your integrity, your determination. That's exactly what I need to set things right." "What do you say?" For a moment, Audrey was quiet, weighing the offer. Then a slow smile spread across her face. "I say, when do we start?" As they walked down the steps together, a new sense of purpose energizing their tired bodies, neither of them noticed the sleek black car parked across the street, its tinted windows concealing the occupant within. Inside, Tiffany Blackwood watched her husband and Audrey with narrowed eyes. The helicopter escape had been a ruse, a distraction to allow her to slip away unnoticed. Now, as she observed the easy camaraderie between Gavin and Audrey, a cold fury settled in her chest. "This isn't over," she murmured, her manicured nails tapping against the leather steering wheel. Not by a long shot. As Tiffany pulled away from the curb, melting into the early morning traffic, the stage was set for a confrontation that would test the limits of loyalty, love, and redemption. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over. Back at the Blackwood mansion, Gavin and Audrey sat in the kitchen, nursing cups of strong coffee. The events of the past 24 hours seemed almost surreal in the warm, familiar surroundings. "We should get some rest," Audrey said, stifling a yawn. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us." Gavin nodded, but made no move to leave. "Audrey," he said after a moment, his voice serious, "I owe you an apology. I should have believed you from the start. If I hadn't been so blind..." Audrey reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "Hey, no, you can't blame yourself. Tiffany fooled a lot of people for a long time. What matters is that when it counted, you did the right thing." Their eyes met, and for a moment the air between them seemed charged with unspoken possibilities. Then Gavin cleared his throat, gently withdrawing his hand. "You're right," he said, standing. "We should get some sleep. Tomorrow we start rebuilding." As Audrey headed to one of the guest rooms, Gavin found himself in the master bedroom he had shared with Tiffany for so many years. It felt different now, colder, emptier. As he changed for bed, his gaze fell on a framed photo on the nightstand. It was from their honeymoon, both of them laughing on a beach in Bali. With a sigh, Gavin placed the photo face down. That chapter of his life was over. It was time to look to the future. Over the next few weeks, Gavin and Audrey threw themselves into the monumental task of untangling the web of financial deceit Tiffany and Ottavio had woven. Days blurred into nights as they pored over financial records, met with lawyers and accountants, and worked to reassure panicked shareholders. Through it all, their partnership deepened. Gavin found himself relying more and more on Audrey's sharp mind and unwavering integrity. For her part, Audrey discovered a newfound respect for Gavin's resilience and determination to make things right. One evening, as they sat in Gavin's home office surrounded by stacks of documents, Audrey leaned back in her chair with a groan. "I think my eyes are about to fall out of my head," she complained, rubbing her temples. Gavin chuckled, setting aside the report he'd been reading. "Maybe it's time for a break. Dinner?" As they sat on the terrace sharing a simple meal of pasta and wine, Gavin found himself studying Audrey in the soft twilight. She had changed in the weeks since that fateful night at the gala. There was a confidence to her now, a quiet strength that he found increasingly attractive. "What?" Audrey asked, noticing his gaze. "Nothing," Gavin said, smiling. "I was just thinking how glad I am to have you here. I'm not sure I could have faced all this alone." Audrey's expression softened. "You're not alone, Gavin, not anymore." The moment was interrupted by Gavin's phone buzzing. He glanced at it, his brow furrowing. "It's Elena," he said, answering the call. "Detective? What's wrong?" As he listened, his face grew increasingly grave. Audrey watched with growing concern. Finally, Gavin hung up, his expression troubled. "They've had a breakthrough in tracking Tiffany and Ottavio," he explained. "They think they've traced them to a small island in the Caribbean." But what?" Audrey prompted when he trailed off. Gavin met her eyes, his gaze intense. "They also have reason to believe Tiffany's planning something big. Elena thinks Tiffany might be coming back to Jacksonville." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. The peace they had found, the progress they had made, it was all suddenly threatened. "What do we do?" Audrey asked, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her gut. Gavin reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "We face it, together. Whatever Tiffany's planning, whatever she throws at us, we'll be ready." As they sat there, hands clasped, the sun setting over the St. John's River, both Gavin and Audrey knew that the real test was yet to come. The final confrontation loomed on the horizon, a storm gathering strength, ready to break over their newly forged alliance. But in that moment, with the warmth of Gavin's hand in hers and the determination shining in his eyes, Audrey felt a surge of confidence. They had come this far together. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side. The stage was set for a showdown that would determine not just their futures, but the very nature of justice and redemption. As night fell over Jacksonville, Gavin and Audrey prepared for a battle that would test the limits of their resolve, their loyalty, and the growing bond between them. The final act was about to begin. The Jacksonville Financial Center loomed against the early morning sky, its glass facade reflecting the first rays of sunlight. Inside the building's most prestigious conference room, tension hung thick in the air as Gavin Blackwood stood at the head of a long mahogany table. Around him sat the company's board of directors, major shareholders and a team of lawyers, their faces a mix of concern, skepticism, and barely concealed anger. Gavin took a deep breath, steadying himself. This was it, the moment of truth. He glanced at Audrey, who stood quietly in the corner, her presence a silent source of strength. With a nod, he began. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming on such short notice. I know there have been rumors, speculation about the state of our company. Today I'm here to lay everything out on the table. The truth, no matter how difficult, must be heard." He clicked a remote, and a series of financial charts appeared on the large screen behind him. For the past several years, our company has been the victim of a sophisticated embezzlement scheme. Millions of dollars have been siphoned off, hidden in a maze of shell companies and offshore accounts. A murmur of shock rippled through the room. One of the older board members, Harrison Wells, leaned forward, his bushy eyebrows furrowed. "Gavin, what are you saying? How could this have happened under our noses?" Gavin's jaw tightened. "Because, Harrison, the person behind this scheme was someone we all trusted implicitly. My wife, Tiffany Blackwood." The room erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped, demanding explanations, expressing disbelief. Gavin held up his hands, calling for silence. "I know this is shocking. Believe me, no one was more blindsided than I was. But I have proof." He nodded to Audrey, who stepped forward, distributing folders to each person in the room. "What you're looking at," Gavin continued as they flipped through the documents, "is the result of months of investigation. Bank records, communication logs, shell company registrations, all leading back to Tiffany and her accomplice, Otavio Mendez." As the gravity of the situation sank in, the mood in the room shifted from disbelief to anger. Patricia Langley, one of the major shareholders, stood up, her voice shaking with rage. "How could you let this happen, Gavin? We trusted you with our investments, our futures." Gavin met her gaze unflinchingly. "You're right, Patricia. I failed you. I failed all of you. I was blind to what was happening right under my nose, and for that, I take full responsibility. But I promise you, I am doing everything in my power to make this right." He went on to outline the steps already taken: freezing suspicious accounts, cooperating with law enforcement, initiating internal audits. As he spoke, Audrey watched the room carefully. She could see the tide beginning to turn, anger giving way to a cautious willingness to listen. Just as Gavin was explaining the plan for moving forward, the conference room door burst open. All heads turned to see Detective Elena Vasquez striding in, her face grim. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, her eyes locking with Gavin's, "but we have a situation. Tiffany Blackwood has been spotted in Jacksonville." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Gavin. He stood frozen for a moment, a myriad of emotions flashing across his face. Then, with visible effort, he composed himself. "Thank you, Detective. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll excuse me, I need to deal with this." Audrey will continue the presentation and answer any questions you may have. As Gavin followed Elena out of the room, Audrey stepped up to the podium, her heart racing. This was not how they had planned this meeting to go, but she knew she had to keep it together. The future of the company and their mission to bring Tiffany to justice depended on it. Meanwhile, in a sleek black SUV speeding through the streets of Jacksonville, Tiffany Blackwood sat in the back seat, her blue eyes cold with determination. Beside her, Otavio shifted nervously, his usual suave demeanor cracking under the pressure. "This is madness, querida," he hissed. "We should be halfway to a non-extradition country by now. Why are we here?" Tiffany's laugh was brittle. "Do you think I'm going to let them win? Let that little bitch Audrey take everything I've worked for? No, Ottavio, this ends on my terms." She pulled out her phone, dialing a number from memory. "It's me," she said when the call connected. "Is everything in place?" "Good. Remember, timing is crucial. We only get one shot at this." As she hung up, a cold smile played on her lips. Gavin thinks he's so clever that he's got it all figured out, but he has no idea what's coming. Ottavio watched her warily, a seed of doubt taking root in his mind. He had always known Tiffany was ruthless, but this felt different, dangerous. For the first time, he wondered if he had aligned himself with the wrong person. Back at the financial center, the board meeting had devolved into barely controlled chaos. Audrey was doing her best to field questions and calm fears, but the news of Tiffany's return had everyone on edge. "What if she tries to access the accounts again?" one board member demanded. "All suspicious accounts have been frozen," Audrey assured them, "and our cybersecurity team is monitoring all activity closely. Tiffany no longer has any access to company funds or systems." Just then, her phone buzzed with a text from Gavin. "Meet me at the riverfront. Bring the USB drive. Be careful." Audrey's heart raced. This was it, the final confrontation they had been preparing for. She quickly wrapped up the meeting, promising further updates soon, and hurried out of the building. As she navigated the busy downtown streets, Audrey's mind whirled with possibilities. What was Tiffany's endgame? And more importantly, how far was she willing to go to get what she wanted? At the riverfront, Gavin paced anxiously, his eyes scanning the area for any sign of Tiffany. Eleanor stood nearby, speaking quietly into her radio, coordinating with her team. "Gavin," Audrey called as she approached. "What's going on? Where's Tiffany?" Before he could answer, a familiar voice cut through the air. "Well, isn't this cozy?" They all turned to see Tiffany striding towards them, Ottavio close behind. She looked immaculate as always, her designer dress and perfectly coiffed hair at odds with the tense situation. "Tiffany," Gavin said, his voice tight. "It's over. Turn yourself in. Make this easier on everyone." Tiffany's laugh was cold. "Oh, darling, you always were so naive. Did you really think I'd come back without an ace up my sleeve?" She snapped her fingers, and suddenly they were surrounded by a group of menacing-looking men. Eleanor reached for her gun, but froze when one of the men trained a weapon on her. "Now," Tiffany said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "here's what's going to happen. Audrey, dear, you're going to hand over that USB drive. And Gavin, you're going to transfer every last cent from the company accounts to the ones I specify. Do that, and maybe, just maybe, I'll let you all walk away from this." Audrey's mind raced. The USB drive in her pocket felt like it was burning a hole through her clothes. Everything they had worked for, all the evidence they had gathered, Tiffany was asking her to hand it all over. Gavin stepped forward, his voice steady despite the tension. "And if we refuse?" Tiffany's smile was razor-sharp. "Well, then things might get a little messy. You see, I've got men positioned all over the city. One word from me and, well, let's just say it would be a very bad day for Jacksonville." The weight of her threat hung heavy in the air. Audrey looked at Gavin, saw the conflict raging in his eyes. They had come so far, fought so hard. Could they really give it all up now? But then, something unexpected happened. Ottavio, who had been standing silently behind Tiffany, suddenly spoke up. "No," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "No more, Tiffany. This has gone too far." Tiffany whirled on him, her eyes blazing. "What are you doing?" she hissed. Ottavio stepped away from her, moving closer to Eleanor. "I'm done. This isn't what I signed up for. Embezzlement is one thing, but this, threatening an entire city, I can't be part of this." He turned to Eleanor. "Detective, I'm willing to cooperate. I'll tell you everything. Every account, every transaction, every illegal deal we ever made. In exchange for leniency, of course." Tiffany's face contorted with rage. "You treacherous bastard!" She lunged for him, but was quickly restrained by Eleanor. As if Ottavio's defection had broken a spell, chaos erupted. Elena's backup team swarmed in, quickly overpowering Tiffany's hired muscle. In the confusion, Audrey saw Tiffany break free, making a run for the river's edge. Without thinking, Audrey gave chase. She could hear Gavin calling her name, but she didn't stop. This was it. their one chance to end this once and for all. She caught up to Tiffany at the end of a pier. The blonde woman spun around, her eyes wild, her carefully cultivated image of control completely shattered. "Stay back," Tiffany shouted, pulling a small handgun from her purse. Her hand shook as she pointed it at Audrey. Audrey raised her hands, her heart pounding. "Tiffany, please. Don't make this worse than it already is. It's over." "Over?" Tiffany laughed, the sound bordering on hysterical. "It's not over until I say it's over. I built this life, this empire. It's mine." "Was it worth it?" Audrey asked, taking a cautious step forward. "The lies, the betrayal, the lives you've ruined? Was it really worth it, Tiffany?" For a moment, something flickered in Tiffany's eyes. Regret, perhaps, or a glimmer of the woman she had once been. But then it was gone, replaced by cold determination. "You don't understand," Tiffany said, her voice low. "You could never understand. I came from nothing. Everything I have, I clawed my way to the top to get. I'm not going back. I'll die before I go back to being nothing." She raised the gun higher, her finger tightening on the trigger. Audrey closed her eyes, bracing for the impact. But instead of a gunshot, she heard a familiar voice cry out, "Tiffany, no!" Audrey's eyes flew open to see Gavin racing down the pier. In that split second of distraction, she lunged forward, grappling with Tiffany for the gun. They struggled, teetering dangerously close to the edge of the pier. Suddenly there was a loud crack, not a gunshot, but the sound of old wood giving way. The section of the pier beneath their feet collapsed, sending both women plunging into the cold waters of the St. John's River. The shock of the water drove the air from Audrey's lungs. She kicked frantically, fighting her way to the surface. As her head broke the water, she gasped for air, looking around wildly for Tiffany. She spotted her a few yards away, struggling to stay afloat. Without hesitation, Audrey swam towards her. Despite everything, she couldn't let Tiffany drown. As she reached her, Tiffany thrashed in panic, nearly pulling Audrey under. "Stop fighting!" Audrey gasped. "I'm trying to help you." Slowly, Tiffany's struggles subsided. Audrey managed to get an arm around her, keeping them both afloat as they were pulled by the river's current. From above, they heard shouts. Gavin and Eleanor were racing along the riverbank, calling for help. In the distance, Audrey could hear the wail of approaching sirens. As they waited for rescue, Audrey felt Tiffany go limp in her arms. For a terrifying moment, she thought the other woman had lost consciousness. But then Tiffany spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you helping me? After everything I've done?" Audrey was quiet for a moment, considering. Finally, she said, "Because it's the right thing to do. Because no matter what you've done, you're still a human being, and because I think there's been enough destruction, enough pain." Tiffany didn't respond, but Audrey felt her relax slightly in her grip. Minutes later, they were being pulled from the river by rescue teams. As paramedics wrapped them in blankets and checked them over, Audrey saw Gavin running towards her. He enveloped her in a fierce hug, not caring that she was soaking wet. "Don't ever do that to me again," he murmured into her hair. Over Gavin's shoulder, Audrey watched as Tiffany was led away in handcuffs, Elena reading her rights. The once proud woman looked small and defeated, her designer dress ruined, her carefully maintained facade washed away by the river. As the adrenaline of the confrontation began to fade, the full weight of what had transpired hit Audrey. They had done it. They had brought Tiffany to justice, exposed the truth, saved the company. It was over. She sagged against Gavin, suddenly exhausted. He held her tighter, supporting her weight. "It's okay," he whispered. "I've got you. It's over now." In the days that followed, the full extent of Tiffany and Ottavio's crimes came to light. With Ottavio's cooperation, authorities were able to trace and recover much of the embezzled funds. The press had a field day, dubbing it the Blackwood Betrayal, and dissecting every detail of the scandal. Gavin threw himself into damage control, working tirelessly to salvage the company's reputation and reassure investors. Audrey was by his side through it all, her steady presence and sharp mind proving invaluable as they navigated the fallout. One evening, about a week after the confrontation at the river, Gavin and Audrey found themselves alone in his office. The sun was setting over Jacksonville, casting a warm glow through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "I got a call from Elena today," Gavin said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Tiffany's agreed to a plea deal. She'll serve time, but it could have been much worse." Audrey nodded, processing the information. "How do you feel about that?" she asked gently. Gavin was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city skyline. Relieved, I think, he finally said. And sad. For the woman I thought I knew. For the life we might have had if things had been different. He turned to look at Audrey, his eyes intense. But mostly I feel grateful. For you. For your persistence. Your integrity. You saved more than just the company, Audrey. You saved me. Audrey felt her heart skip a beat. The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken tension. Slowly, almost hesitantly, Gavin reached out, cupping her face in his hand. Audrey, But before he could finish, there was a knock at the door. They sprang apart as Gavin's assistant poked her head in. Mr. Blackwood? The conference call with the Tokyo office is starting in 5 minutes. Gavin cleared his throat, composing himself. Right, thank you, Sarah, I'll be right there. As Sarah left, Gavin turned back to Audrey. The moment had passed, but something had shifted between them, a new understanding taking root. We should probably get back to work, Audrey said softly, a small smile playing at her lips. Gavin nodded, returning her smile. Yes, we should. But Audrey? This conversation isn't over. As they walked out of the office together, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, both Gavin and Audrey knew that while one chapter of their story had closed, another was just beginning. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, the future looked bright with possibility. The sun set on Jacksonville, casting long shadows across the city. From the ashes of betrayal and deceit, a new foundation had been laid, one built on trust, integrity, and the unshakable bond forged between two people who had weathered the storm together. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side. The aftermath of Tiffany's arrest sent shockwaves through Jacksonville's business and social circles. For days, it seemed like every news channel and newspaper was dissecting the Blackwood betrayal, as it had been dubbed. Reporters camped outside the Blackwood mansion and company headquarters, hungry for any new developments. Inside the eye of this media storm, Gavin and Audrey worked tirelessly to keep the company afloat. The boardroom became their second home as they met with lawyers, accountants, and PR specialists, strategizing on how to move forward. One particularly grueling evening, as they pored over financial reports, Gavin leaned back in his chair with a heavy sigh. Sometimes I wonder if it's even worth trying to save, he admitted, his voice laced with exhaustion. Maybe it would be easier to just let it all go. Start fresh. Audrey looked up from her laptop, her eyes softening as she took in Gavin's weary expression. Hey, she said gently, moving to perch on the edge of his desk. This company is more than just Tiffany's crimes. It's the hard work of thousands of employees, the dreams of investors who believed in you. We can't give up on that. Gavin met her gaze, a small smile tugging at his lips. We? I don't recall offering you a permanent position, Miss Foster. Audrey rolled her eyes, but her smile mirrored his. Please, as if you could do this without me. The moment of levity was interrupted by a knock at the door. Elena entered, her face serious. We've got a problem, she announced without preamble. Ottavio's lawyer is arguing that his cooperation should grant him immunity. If the judge agrees, he could walk free. Gavin's jaw clenched. After everything he's done? There has to be something we can do. Elena nodded. There might be, but I'm going to need both of you to testify. It won't be easy. Ottavio's lawyer will try to discredit you, maybe even implicate you in the scheme. Are you prepared for that? Gavin and Audrey exchanged a look, an unspoken understanding passing between them. We'll do whatever it takes, Audrey said firmly. Ottavio doesn't get to walk away from this. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of courtroom appearances and legal maneuvering. True to Elena's warning, Ottavio's defense team came at them hard, trying to paint Gavin as a willing participant in the embezzlement and Audrey as a gold digger looking to take advantage of a crumbling marriage. But with each attack, Gavin and Audrey's resolve only strengthened. They stood firm in their testimony, their united front a stark contrast to Ottavio's increasing desperation on the stand. The turning point came when Audrey produced a series of encrypted emails she had discovered on the USB drive, communications between Ottavio and several known criminal organizations. It was the smoking gun they needed, proving that Ottavio's involvement went far beyond simple embezzlement. As the judge denied Ottavio's plea for immunity and remanded him to custody to await trial, Gavin felt a weight lift from his shoulders. In the corridor outside the courtroom, he pulled Audrey into a tight embrace. We did it, he murmured into her hair. "I couldn't have done this without you, Audrey." Audrey pulled back slightly, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "We did it together," she corrected him. "That's what partners do." The word partners hung in the air between them, loaded with possibilities. Gavin's hand came up to cup Audrey's cheek, his thumb brushing lightly across her cheekbone. For a moment, the world around them faded away, the bustle of the courthouse receding into the background. But before either of them could act on the tension crackling between them, Elena's voice broke the spell. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, though her knowing smile suggested she wasn't sorry at all. "But the press is waiting for a statement. You two ready to face the wolves?" Gavin dropped his hand, clearing his throat. "Right. Yes. Let's do this." As they made their way to the press conference, Audrey's mind whirled. What had just happened? What would have happened if Elena hadn't interrupted? And more importantly, what did it mean for their future? The glare of camera flashes greeted them as they stepped up to the podium. Gavin's hand found the small of Audrey's back, a gesture of support that sent a warmth spreading through her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gavin began, his voice steady and confident, "today marks a significant step forward in our pursuit of justice. But more than that, it marks the beginning of a new chapter for Blackwood Enterprises." As Gavin delivered his statement, outlining plans for corporate restructuring and a renewed commitment to ethical business practices, Audrey watched him with a mixture of pride and something deeper, something she wasn't quite ready to name. One thing was clear: whatever the future held, they would face it together. The bonds forged in the crucible of this ordeal were not easily broken. As partners, as friends, and perhaps as something more, Gavin and Audrey stood ready to rebuild, to rectify past wrongs, and to create something stronger and more beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. The road ahead would not be easy. There were still legal battles to fight, a company to salvage, and personal demons to conquer. But as they stood there, united under the glare of the media spotlight, both Gavin and Audrey felt a sense of hope they hadn't dared to feel in months. The Blackwood betrayal had shaken Jacksonville to its core, but from this shaking, a new foundation was emerging, one built on truth, integrity, and the unshakable bond between two people who had weathered the storm together. As the press conference wound down and they prepared to face the next challenge, Gavin leaned in close to Audrey. "Ready for what comes next?" he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Audrey turned to him, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Bring it on," she replied, her voice filled with determination and a hint of excitement for the unknown future stretching out before them. With a final nod to the press, Gavin and Audrey turned and walked away from the podium, side by side, ready to write the next chapter of their story, together. The Jacksonville sun beat down mercilessly as Tiffany Blackwood, once the toast of high society, was led from the courthouse in handcuffs. Her designer clothes had been replaced by a drab prison jumpsuit, her perfectly coiffed hair now lank and lifeless. The crowd of reporters surged forward, shouting questions, but Tiffany kept her head down, a far cry from the confident, camera-ready socialite she had once been. Inside the courthouse, Gavin Blackwood watched the scene unfold on a small TV in the corner of the room. His face was a mask of complex emotions, relief, sadness, and a touch of lingering disbelief. Beside him, Audrey Foster stood quietly, her hand resting lightly on his arm in a gesture of support. 15 years, Gavin murmured, shaking his head. "It doesn't seem real." Audrey squeezed his arm gently. "It's over, Gavin. She can't hurt anyone else now." As they left the courthouse, they were immediately swarmed by reporters. Gavin raised a hand, calling for quiet. "I'll make a brief statement," he announced, his voice steady despite the turmoil of emotions beneath the surface. "Today, justice has been served. The actions of Tiffany Blackwood and her accomplices have caused immeasurable harm to our company, to our employees, and to the trust of our investors and the public. While this verdict cannot undo the damage done, it is a crucial step towards accountability and healing." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "Blackwood Enterprises is committed to learning from this experience. We are implementing sweeping changes to ensure nothing like this can ever happen again. We ask for patience and understanding as we work to rebuild trust and create a stronger, more transparent company." As they pushed through the crowd towards their waiting car, Audrey couldn't help but admire Gavin's composure. She knew the toll this ordeal had taken on him, yet here he was, standing tall and facing the future head-on. Back at Blackwood Enterprises headquarters, the atmosphere was one of cautious optimism. The verdict had provided a sense of closure, but everyone knew the real work was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, Gavin and Audrey threw themselves into the monumental task of reorganizing the company. Conference rooms became war rooms, whiteboards covered in flowcharts and action plans. They worked long into the night, fueled by determination and countless cups of coffee. One evening, as they pored over the latest audit reports, Gavin leaned back in his chair with a groan. "I never thought I'd say this, but I almost miss the days when my biggest worry was which charity gala to attend." Audrey chuckled, stretching her arms above her head. "Oh, come on. Where's your sense of adventure? Nothing says excitement like corporate restructuring." Gavin's laugh was warm and genuine, a sound that had become increasingly common in recent weeks. "What would I do without you, Audrey? You've been my rock through all of this." Their eyes met across the desk, and for a moment the air between them seemed charged with unspoken possibilities. Audrey felt her heart skip a beat, but before she could respond, Gavin's phone buzzed with an incoming call. "It's Elena," he said, glancing at the screen. "I should take this." As Gavin stepped out to take the call, Audrey tried to calm her racing heart. These moments had been happening more frequently lately, lingering glances, casual touches that sent electricity coursing through her veins. She knew their relationship had evolved beyond mere colleagues, but into what, she wasn't quite sure. Gavin returned a few minutes later, his expression thoughtful. "Elena says they've traced more of the embezzled funds. It looks like Tiffany had accounts we didn't know about, hidden even from Ottavio." Audrey frowned. "How much are we talking about?" "Millions," Gavin replied, running a hand through his hair. "It's going to be a legal nightmare trying to recover it all." Audrey stood, moving around the desk to stand beside him. "Hey," she said softly, waiting until he met her eyes. "We'll figure it out, we always do." Gavin's smile was tired but genuine. "We do, don't we?" He reached out, taking her hand in his. "Audrey, But before he could finish, there was a knock at the door. Sarah, Gavin's assistant, poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but the board is waiting for your call. It's about the new ethical guidelines." Gavin nodded, squeezing Audrey's hand once before letting go. "Right, of course, I'll be right there." As Sarah left, Gavin turned back to Audrey. "Rain check on that conversation?" Audrey nodded, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. "Of course. Go dazzle the board with your ethical brilliance." As Gavin left for his call, Audrey found herself staring out the window at the Jacksonville skyline. So much had changed in the past few months. The company was slowly but surely finding its footing again. New safeguards were being put in place. Transparency was becoming more than just a buzzword. And there was a renewed sense of purpose among the employees. But it wasn't just the company that had changed. Audrey had watched Gavin transform from a man shattered by betrayal to a leader determined to right past wrongs. And in the process, she had found herself falling for him in a way she never expected. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The company launched a series of town hall meetings, giving employees at all levels a chance to voice their concerns and suggestions. Gavin and Audrey attended each one, listening intently and taking notes. "I never realized how disconnected upper management had become," Gavin admitted after one particularly intense session. "We need to do better." And they did. Slowly but surely, trust began to rebuild. A new ethics committee was formed, with representatives from every department. Whistleblower protections were strengthened, and a zero-tolerance policy for financial misconduct was implemented. Throughout it all, Gavin and Audrey's partnership deepened. They became a formidable team, their strengths complementing each other perfectly. Where Gavin brought years of business experience and industry connections, Audrey brought fresh perspectives and an unwavering moral compass. Their evolving relationship didn't go unnoticed. Office gossip swirled, but neither Gavin nor Audrey paid it much mind. They were too focused on the task at hand, too committed to their shared vision of what Blackwood Enterprises could become. One rainy Saturday afternoon, they found themselves working late again, finalizing plans for a new charitable foundation, one of Gavin's pet projects, born from a desire to give back to the community that had been hurt by the scandal. "What do you think about focusing on education?" Audrey suggested, sketching out ideas on a whiteboard. "Scholarships for underprivileged kids, funding for STEM programs in schools." Gavin nodded enthusiastically. "I love it. And maybe we could partner with local businesses for internship programs, give kids real-world experience. As they brainstormed, the energy in the room was palpable. This was what they did best, taking an idea and building it into something meaningful, something that could make a real difference. In a lull in the conversation, Gavin found himself watching Audrey as she scribbled notes, her brow furrowed in concentration. He was struck, not for the first time, by how integral she had become to his life, both personally and professionally. "Audrey," he said softly, waiting until she looked up at him, "I think it's time we had that conversation we keep putting off." Audrey's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her voice steady. "Okay, I'm listening." Gavin took a deep breath. "These past few months have been, well, they've been hell, honestly, but you've been there through all of it. You've challenged me, supported me, believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself." He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "I know the timing isn't ideal. There's still so much work to do with the company, and I'm still dealing with the fallout from Tiffany's betrayal, but I can't ignore how I feel anymore. Audrey, I'm falling in love with you." For a moment, Audrey was speechless. Then, a slow smile spread across her face. "Gavin," she said softly, "I'm falling in love with you too." Their first kiss was soft, tentative but filled with promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were grinning like teenagers. "So," Audrey said, a mischievous glint in her eye, "does this mean I get a promotion?" Gavin laughed, pulling her close again. "How about partner? In every sense of the word." As they sealed the deal with another kiss, both knew that while challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The news of Gavin and Audrey's relationship was met with a mix of reactions. Some employees were thrilled, seeing it as a symbol of the company's renewal. Others were more skeptical, worried about the implications for the corporate hierarchy. Gavin and Audrey addressed the concerns head-on, holding a company-wide meeting to discuss the situation openly. They outlined clear guidelines for their professional interactions and promised complete transparency in all decision-making processes. "Our personal relationship will never compromise the integrity of this company," Gavin assured the assembled employees. "If anything, it strengthens our commitment to ethical business practices and the well-being of everyone who works here." As the weeks turned into months, the new Blackwood Enterprises began to take shape. The charitable foundation, named in honor of Audrey's father, launched its first programs. A new line of eco-friendly products hit the market, part of Gavin's push towards more sustainable business practices. There were setbacks, of course. Some investors remained wary, and competitors tried to capitalize on the lingering effects of the scandal. But with each challenge, the company emerged stronger, more resilient. 1 year to the day after Tiffany's arrest, Gavin and Audrey stood together on the balcony of his, now their, penthouse apartment, looking out over the city they'd worked so hard to rebuild trust with. "Did you ever imagine we'd end up here?" Audrey asked, leaning into Gavin's embrace. He chuckled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Not in my wildest dreams, but I wouldn't change a thing." As they stood there, contemplating the future stretching out before them, both felt a sense of peace they hadn't experienced in a long time. The road hadn't been easy, and there would undoubtedly be more challenges ahead, but they had each other, and a shared vision of what they could accomplish together. The sun set over Jacksonville, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. It was a new day for Blackwood Enterprises, for Gavin and Audrey, and for a city learning to trust again. The scars of the past would always be there, but they had become a foundation for something stronger, something built on honesty, integrity, and love. As night fell and the city lights began to twinkle, Gavin turned to Audrey with a smile. "Ready for our next adventure?" Audrey's answering grin was radiant. "Always." Hand in hand, they walked back into their home, ready to face whatever the future might bring, together. Epilogue. 5 years later, the Jacksonville Business Journal ran a cover story titled "Phoenix Rising, the Remarkable Rebirth of Blackwood Enterprises." The article detailed the company's journey from scandal-ridden pariah to industry leader in corporate responsibility and sustainable business practices. Gavin and Audrey Blackwood, now married for 3 years, were featured prominently. The photo showed them not in a stuffy boardroom, but at a local school, surrounded by beaming students benefiting from the Blackwood Foundation's education initiatives. The article praised their innovative approach to business, highlighting programs like employee profit sharing, extensive parental leave policies, and partnerships with local communities for job creation and environmental conservation. But perhaps the most telling quote came from an anonymous employee. "Working here isn't just a job anymore. It's being part of something bigger, something meaningful." Gavin and Audrey have created a culture where we all feel invested in the company's success and its impact on the world. As for Tiffany, a small sidebar mentioned that she was still serving her sentence, though she had begun participating in a prison education program, teaching financial literacy to fellow inmates. Otavio, having served a shorter sentence due to his cooperation, had moved back to Brazil upon his release. Last reports placed him working for a small non-profit focused on rehabilitating white-collar criminals. The final paragraph of the article looked to the future, hinting at exciting new developments on the horizon for Blackwood Enterprises. Industry insiders speculated about expansion into green energy technologies and groundbreaking advancements in sustainable manufacturing processes. But for Gavin and Audrey, their greatest project was much closer to home. As the magazine hit newsstands, they were in the hospital welcoming their first child, a daughter they named Hope, a living symbol of the future they had fought so hard to create. As Gavin held his newborn daughter, with Audrey smiling tiredly but radiantly beside him, he felt a sense of completion. The journey had been long and often painful, but it had led them here, to a life filled with purpose, love, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Outside the hospital window, Jacksonville sparkled in the morning sun, a city renewed and revitalized. And in that quiet hospital room, a new chapter began, not just for the Blackwood family, but for all those whose lives they would touch in the years to come. The scandal that had once threatened to destroy everything had instead become the catalyst for transformation, proving that even from the darkest moments, light can emerge. As Hope gurgled softly in her father's arms, Gavin and Audrey exchanged a look of pure joy and determination. Whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them as they had faced everything else. Together, with hope, and with an unwavering commitment to making the world a little bit better each day. The Blackwood legacy, once tarnished by greed and deceit, had been reforged into something beautiful, a testament to the power of integrity, perseverance, and love. And as the sun rose on this new day, it seemed to shine just a little bit brighter, illuminating the path forward for a family, a company, and a community, united in their quest for a better tomorrow. The Jacksonville sun cast a warm glow over the Blackwood estate as it peaked above the horizon. The mansion, once a symbol of opulence and excess, had undergone a transformation as dramatic as its owners. Gone were the ostentatious decorations and cold, impersonal spaces. In their place stood a home filled with warmth, laughter, and love. Gavin Blackwood stood on the terrace sipping his morning coffee and watching the grounds come to life. The manicured lawns that once hosted lavish parties had been converted into community gardens, tended by local volunteers and providing fresh produce to food banks across the city. The gaudy fountains had been replaced with solar panels, a testament to Blackwood Enterprises' commitment to sustainability. "Daddy! Daddy!" a small voice called out, interrupting Gavin's reverie. He turned, a broad smile spreading across his face as his 5-year-old daughter, Hope, came barreling towards him. "Good morning, sunshine," Gavin laughed, scooping her up into his arms. "What's got you so excited this early?" Hope's green eyes, so like her mother's, sparkled with enthusiasm. "It's Foundation Day. We get to go to the school and meet all the kids." Gavin's heart swelled with pride. Foundation Day had become an annual tradition, a day when the Blackwood Educational Fund recipients gathered to celebrate their achievements and meet their benefactors. It was Hope's favorite day of the year, a fact that never failed to move Gavin. "That's right, sweetheart," he said, kissing her forehead. "Why don't you go help Mommy get ready?" As Hope scampered off, Gavin took a moment to reflect on the journey that had led to this point. 10 years had passed since the scandal that nearly destroyed everything he had built. 10 years since Audrey had entered his life, bringing with her the promise of redemption and a love he never thought he'd find again. Inside the house, Audrey was in the kitchen, packing snacks for the day's events. At 38, she was more beautiful than ever, her face etched with lines of laughter rather than worry. She looked up as Gavin entered, her smile as radiant as the day they first met. "There you are," she said, accepting his kiss. "I was beginning to think you'd gotten lost in your thoughts again." Gavin chuckled, wrapping his arms around her waist. Just reflecting on how lucky we are. Did you ever imagine back when all this started that we'd end up here? Audrey's expression softened. Honestly? No, but I'm grateful every day that we did. Their moment was interrupted by Hope's return, now dressed in a little blazer that matched her father's. I'm ready, she announced proudly. As they drove to the school where the Foundation Day celebration was being held, Gavin couldn't help but marvel at how much had changed. Blackwood Enterprises had not only recovered from the scandal, but had become a leader in corporate responsibility. The Blackwood Educational Fund, started in memory of Audrey's father, had provided scholarships to thousands of underprivileged students across Jacksonville. The school auditorium was buzzing with excitement as they arrived. Students, parents, and teachers greeted them warmly, a far cry from the suspicious glances and whispered accusations of years past. Gavin felt a lump form in his throat as he watched Hope mingle with the scholarship recipients, her natural empathy shining through. As Audrey took the stage to deliver the opening speech, Gavin's mind wandered to Tiffany. She had been released from prison 2 years ago, her sentence reduced for good behavior. Last he heard, she was working with a non-profit organization helping women rebuild their lives after incarceration. It was a redemption story of its own, one that Gavin hoped would continue. And now, Audrey's voice brought him back to the present, I'd like to invite my husband, Gavin Blackwood, to say a few words. As Gavin stepped up to the podium, he felt a sense of purpose that had been missing in his life for so long before Audrey. He looked out at the sea of faces, bright young minds full of potential, parents beaming with pride, educators dedicated to shaping the future. This, he realized, was his true legacy. 10 years ago, he began, his voice strong and clear, I stood before a different crowd, trying to explain how the company that bore my name had fallen so far. It was the darkest moment of my life, but standing here today, I can say with certainty that it was also the beginning of something beautiful. He went on to speak about the power of second chances, the importance of integrity, and the transformative nature of education. As he concluded his speech, he felt a small hand slip into his. Hope had joined him on stage, her presence a living symbol of the future they were all working towards. The rest of the day passed in a blur of heartfelt conversations, inspiring student presentations, and moments of quiet reflection. As the sun began to set, Gavin, Audrey, and Hope stood on the steps of the school, watching the last of the attendees depart. Did we do good, Daddy? Hope asked, her voice sleepy but satisfied. Gavin knelt down, looking into his daughter's eyes. We did, sweetheart, and we'll keep doing good, every single day. Later that night, after Hope had been tucked into bed, Gavin and Audrey sat on the terrace where the day had begun. The Jacksonville skyline twinkled in the distance, a reminder of the city that had given them so much and to which they had dedicated their lives to giving back. I was thinking, Audrey said, breaking the comfortable silence, about expanding the foundation, maybe set up a program for adult education, help people who never got the chance to finish school. Gavin smiled, unsurprised by his wife's ever-present desire to do more. I think that's a wonderful idea. We could partner with local businesses, create a pathway to employment. As they discussed the possibilities, Gavin was struck by a profound sense of contentment. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, of fear, of near despair. But sitting here with the woman he loved, planning ways to make the world a little bit better, this was everything he never knew he wanted. You know, he said, taking Audrey's hand, I never thanked you properly. Audrey raised an eyebrow. For what? For saving me. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. For showing me that it's never too late to start over, to do the right thing. Tears glistened in Audrey's eyes as she leaned in to kiss him softly. We saved each other, Gavin, and we're just getting started. As the night deepened around them, Gavin and Audrey Blackwood sat hand in hand, their hearts full of love, gratitude, and hope for the future. They had weathered the storm of scandal and emerged stronger, their bond forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by a shared commitment to making a difference. In the quiet of the evening, with the weight of their journey behind them and the promise of tomorrow ahead, they found peace. The Blackwood legacy, once tarnished, now shone brighter than ever, a beacon of hope, redemption, and the enduring power of love to transform lives and communities. And as the stars twinkled overhead, Gavin and Audrey knew that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together. Hand in hand, heart to heart, united in their quest, to leave the world a little bit better than they found it. If this story touched your heart and you want to keep following inspiring and moving stories, be sure to check out our upcoming videos. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to stay updated on new content that can brighten your journey and provide valuable insights. Join us and keep exploring stories that truly matter. I'm sure the next video that pops up on your screen will touch you as well, so click on it now and we'll see you there.